All right, so that's kind of the nine basic principles of building resiliency in your recovery. So now we're going to talk about personal resiliency builders, right? So if you think about the exercise I told you in the beginning of identifying your strengths, right? And so once you identify your strengths, you'll be able to realize they fall into one of 15 categories, all right? And these categories are called personal resiliency builders, right? So don't expect to have all 15 of them in your life, right? Because you're not, right? No one is perfect. No one's going to have all of these, but you probably have at least two or three of them, right? And so these personal resiliency builders are your strengths that allow you to live a resilient life, right? And so here are the strengths that will help you to live a resilient life. Number one is relationships, right? Positive relationships that you can rely on during difficult times, as opposed to negative yes people who will tell you what you want to hear, right? And so you've got to have positive relationships, right? If all you do is go back to your old buddies and hang out with them in the old places, the moment you have a difficulty, they're going to say, "Hey, smoke this. Hey, drink this," right? And so um, I had a client 4 years ago, and he came to me one day. He said, "You know what, Mr. Craig?" He said, "I'm growing." I'm like, "Oh yeah?" I was like, "How do you know that you're growing?" He said, "Well, for so long, for all the way, anytime I'm in my addiction," he said, "I always go to the yes person. I go to people who are negative, who are going to tell me what I want to hear, not what I need to hear." And he said, "Now," he said, "I'm learning to go to the people who tell me what I need to hear and not what I want to hear." And so you've got to have positive people who are going to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. All right. Number two is service, right? So we kind of talked about this, the power of helping others, right? It really helps you to put things into perspective. And so um, get involved with helping people, right? And so you have a bad day, right, at work, and you go to a food bank, and you see people who are homeless, and you're like, wow, you know what? That used to be me, or at least, you know what? I might have difficulties right now, but at least that's not the problem I have to deal with today, right? And so it helps you to put things into perspective. So just simply helping people, right? And I know that whenever I start to struggle with things that going on in my life, and I can give you time and time again where when I have stepped up to help people, my attitude changes, right? And it really helps me to put things into perspective. So there is power in service work, power in helping others. The third one is humor, right? Having a good sense of humor, right? And, I can tell you that in my life, like I love to use humor, right? I probably use it a little too much, but when I was really struggling the most in my life, humor gave me what I needed to kind of get through the moment, right? To be able to push on through the next day, right? And so there's power in humor, right? And so think about this, like how many of you have ever been at a funeral or a repast or something like that, or a viewing, or just somewhere where, or maybe in a hospital waiting room, waiting, someone has been in an accident or something, right? It's not a very fun time, but someone will say something funny and you'll start to laugh, right? And so here you are, you're going through this traumatic experience, right? And you're upset, but then someone says something funny and you start laughing, right? And so that's just a small way of how humor can help you to get through a difficult time in your life. The next one is an inner direction, right? This is the belief that you control your future, right? The belief that you can control your future, right? And not blaming others, right? And so, you guys, everybody here in this room has the ability to control your future, right? You're controlling your future today by coming to this program, by sitting through this lesson here. You are controlling your future, right? And so that belief of having that inner sense of direction that you are in control and that you're going to move in the direction of recovery, right, can be what pulls you through when you get back to DC and you're thinking, man, you know what? I don't know if I really want to live in recovery anymore, man. My stomach's flipping. Uh, you know, I just don't like the way things that are going on right now. I had a stressful day at work, right? But believing that you are in control of your future, of like, you know what? If I do this, I know exactly where I'm going to end up, and I can't do that. So I'm going to continue to live in recovery, right? That's just an example of how inner direction can help you. Instead of like, oh, my boss is such a jerk, I'm going to show him, and I'm going to go out and get drunk tonight, and trying to put the blame on your boss, right? Whereas that inner sense of direction can help you pull through and not blame others and not set you up for a relapse. All right. The next one is perceptiveness, right? This is having an understanding of people and situations, right? Being able to perceive, right? So I could today, we could all get in the bus, we could drive back to DC, and we can drive around to all the different neighborhoods, and I guarantee you that you guys would be able to point out, like, oh, that dude right there, he's got some, right? I could go up and buy some from him, because that is perceptiveness, right? Being perceptive and understanding of people and situations, and knowing who's got it and who doesn't, right? And so you've got to have this, right, of understanding, like, hey, you know what, this dude is probably not someone that I should hang out with, right? So a great example of this, a client several years ago, he was I saw him after graduation, right? He came up to me. He said, Mr. Craig, he said, this stuff really works. He said, I was outside Leland, and a guy came up and we were talking. He wanted me to go somewhere, and then he thought about it. He's like, he perceived the situation. He's like, man, he goes, I do not want to go with him, because he perceived the situation as being a negative situation, and he made the right decision. And so he was able to continue on and be a success in his recovery. It was the story that I told y'all last week of I was at the convenience store waiting on my food, and the guy came in, right? And he kind of walked around the store, and immediately, as soon as he walked in the store, I'm like, I think this guy is up to something, right? Because I was perceiving his body language. I was perceiving just that he wasn't relaxed, right? He kind of was tense, and there was just things about his body language that made me pick up on and made me realize that this guy's up to something. And he walked out of the store, and I'm like, daggone, I thought he was up to something. And then like 30 seconds later, he comes back in, right? And that was when he had the empty cup. And what he was up to was he walked up to the soda machine, got a free soda, and walked out without paying for it, right? So not a big deal, but it was there was some perceptiveness that I had, that I understood that he was going to do something that wasn't right, right? And so and I was correct. All right, the next one is independence, right? So this is having the ability to distance yourself from unhealthy people, right? You've got to have some level of independence. You've got to be able to get away from old people, right? Old using buddies, maybe family members that aren't healthy for you, or family members that use, right? You've got to be able to distance yourself from unhealthy people, right? And so think about an unhealthy person. It's not just someone who uses drugs and alcohol, right? It could be someone that puts you in a bad mood, someone that encourages you to not go to meetings, right? It could be a lot of different things, right? And so you've got to have the ability to be comfortable in who you are as a person, right? And who you are as a recovering individual, right? To say, you know what, I need to stay separate from that person. I need to be independent from that person, right? You need the ability to be your own person, right? I remember years ago, I was 19, and I was in a bar drinking one night, and with some friends, and there was one friend in there that we were all trying to get to drink, and he said, no, I'm not going to drink, right? And he hung out with us, had a great time, but he didn't drink. And I looked back at him, and I'm like, wow, why couldn't I have been more like him? Why did I give in? And why was I drinking and not him, right? Because he had the ability to distance himself and to be his own person that said, no matter what you're doing, I'm not going to do it, right? And so that's the level of independence that you need to have. All right. The next one is optimism, right? Optimism, being optimistic, right? Expecting a positive future. That's what optimism is expecting a positive future, right? And so you've got to have some level of optimism that today might be a better day, but tomorrow has the, is a new day, and tomorrow can be a better day, right? So that's optimism, right? And so in your deepest, darkest times, you have the ability to think, you know what, I can just pull through this, and this is going to end one day, and then things will get better, right? I remember 16 years ago going through, I made a mistake and I was suffering some consequences from it. And one of my buddies walked up to me. He said, Craig, he said, I know that right now you can't see it because all you can see is this storm that's right in front of you. And he said, but he goes, I tell you, he said, I've been where you're at. This situation is going to end. Things will get better down the road, right? And that was something that really encouraged me. I hung to that, right? I latched onto it, and I just believe that, hey, you know what? This storm sucks, but things are going to get better. And so now, looking back 16 years later, things definitely got better, right? It wasn't easy, it wasn't fun, but I got through it and things got better, right? And so you've got to have that optimism that no matter what you're experiencing in your life, that you don't need to relapse because of something bad happening to you, that you can cling to, hey, you know what? I can make it through this today. Tomorrow's a new day, and eventually one day will come where this situation will end and things will get better. All right, the next one is flexibility, right? Flexibility. This is adjusting to change, right? Having the ability to adjust to change. So if you think of trees, right? The trees outside here. I love to watch the trees when the wind blows, right? Because you're going to see how the trees will bend with the wind, right? And so it's really interesting that what gives the tree its true strength to survive a storm, to survive a hurricane, to survive strong winds is its ability to flex, right? The ability to flex, to move with the wind, right? To move back and forth. This is what keeps it alive, gives it its strength, right? And it's not rigid, right? And so, like when a tree dies and it loses its ability to flex, what happens is the wind blows it and it falls over, right? Because it lost its ability to be flexible. And so, in life, you've got to be flexible. You've got to have the ability to adjust to change, right? And many of you that have been here for some time now, you have a great example of that is the new program that we unleashed 4 weeks ago, right? Things change, things that you didn't like change, right? And so that gave you the ability to either remain rigid and get mad and leave the program, or you can learn to be flexible and to adjust with it, right? And that's what you did. and and so that's a way that flexibility can give you strength. The next one is teachability. All right, so kind of as I've said, I have some history in management and most of the companies I've worked for. I've interviewed over 100 people face to face. I've done over 300 phone interviews. Um, and one of the main qualities that I looked for in a candidate was, were they willing to learn, right? That is what teachable means, is that you are willing to learn. And so I would rather have someone that maybe doesn't know how to do the job as good as someone else, as long as they have the willing to learn, right? And so to me, that is the most important thing, right? You might think today that you have all the answers, that you know how to live in recovery, but I can tell you, you don't. You have a lot to learn. Everybody has a lot to learn. And so you need to have the attitude of, hey, you know what? I don't know everything. Um, and so I can learn from someone else, right?